Hi, I'm Linwood Pendleton, and I am the Executive Director of the Ocean Knowledge Action Network's International Project Office. And I'd like to spend a few minutes talking to you about how we're building our Knowledge Action Network to share global knowledge about co-designing ocean science for sustainable development and management. Now, in the past, we often talked about science to policy, but we realized that just doing our science and hoping it's useful doesn't really work. So now we've moved to an approach that involves the stakeholders and people who need science from the very beginning. Sometimes you'll see this referred to as mission-oriented science. We call it the co-design of science, which includes the co-conception and the co-production and the co-delivery of science with stakeholders. Other people talk about this even more broadly to include the co-creation of knowledge. And in some circles, it's referred to as open science. But regardless of the nomenclature, this is really about how do we bring people together in transdisciplinary settings so that our science is more useful to people who make decisions about the world we live in. Co-designing ocean science requires that we bring together scientists from a wide variety of disciplines, including the natural and social sciences, lawyers and policymakers and political scientists, stakeholders of all sorts, from politicians down to people shopping at the supermarket, and even funders. And what we have to do is we have to stimulate collaboration among this diverse group so they can begin to share knowledge about their experiences working together. And what we want to do is make sure that as people embark on co-design around the world, that knowledge about how to do co-design is shared widely. When we talk about building a knowledge action network from the ground up, we really have to start with the network part first. And I'm going to talk about how we're building our network in, I think, a new way from how we've built networks in the past. Once we have that strong network, then we can move on to focus on knowledge and knowledge creation and then sharing that knowledge. And of course, all of this is done with the hopes of achieving real actionable science. From a network perspective, we want to build a modern network, and that means it's a network that is trusted and trustworthy. That means that the people within the network trust each other and understand what it means to work together. But it also means that people outside of the network trust the network and are very clear about how the network works and achieves its mission. The network should be self-organizing, and I'll come back to that in a second, but that really means it's the members of the network who lead the network and not its international project office, for instance. The members have to be empowered to take leadership roles, to take decisions, to initiate new activities, and to chart the way forward for the network. And most importantly, the network needs to be bottom up. Can't come out of the project office, it needs to come from the members. If we want this network to be global, it has to be cross-cultural, cross-disciplinary, cross-sectoral, multilingual, has to be able to work across many time zones. And this is really a challenge in building a new kind of global network, like our Knowledge Action Network. And it needs to be inclusive. There are a lot of power imbalances in a network that's this broad, and both in terms of culture, sector, discipline, but also across countries, in terms of technology and economic access to resources and things like that. And if we really want this to have an impact on our ocean, it needs to be global. From a knowledge perspective, we want to make sure that people can share knowledge in real time. We don't want people to think that the only way to share knowledge is by submitting it to a journal, waiting for it to be peer reviewed, and then shared widely that way. We want people to be able to find each other and talk and share personal experiences. We want to start with knowledge that people already have and that members of our network need. And as we become better and better at sharing very basic kind of knowledge, we can get into more sophisticated kind of knowledge, like that comes from trying to do the co-design of science. And from an action perspective, what we're really focusing on to begin with is science that will help us manage people and the ocean better. And so that includes marine life science that's needed for everything from figuring out where you're going to put aquaculture or offshore wind energy, to anything you do in the ocean really has to be informed by marine life science. We're also focusing on actions associated with the sustainable blue economy, fisheries, marine protection, and of course, this is a real decade of new ways of observing the ocean. We want to make sure that we're helping our partners include stakeholders so that the information that we're collecting about the ocean is the information that our stakeholders need to make decisions about that ocean. And then it has to be inclusive. And so that means we have to engage all the members of our network, but we also have to help our members engage each other. And that's a real challenge for many of our members who are not used to working across so many disciplines and so many sectors. And finally, we want to make sure that our network doesn't just create old colonial ways of working, but really is embedded in the best of modern day thinking about how to avoid colonial practices through creating within our network anti-colonial ways of working that recognize power imbalances and address these up front. And finally, we want to make sure that we're sharing capacity across our network. Our members have very different skills and skill sets, and if we can help them share those skills and capacity, it will strengthen everybody. We want to make sure that the network we build is not a hub and spoke network. So right now we have the International Project Office in the middle, bringing all of these different partners together. But ultimately, to be a resilient and scalable network, we have to make sure that our partners are connected to each other. So this is what I mentioned earlier about a self-organizing network. We're working towards having a self-organizing network where the International Project Office, represented by a red dot here, really catalyzes and supports the network, but doesn't lead the network. And to do that, we've built our network from the bottom up, starting with partners in a wide variety of regions around the world to reflect different languages, different cultures, different ways of working. We figure if we can build our foundation for the Ocean Knowledge Action Network around this core of on-the-ground members, then we'll be able to scale up to become a global network. We're part of the Future Earth Network, which is a very large global network that's really focused on advancing sustainability science, which is science that is intended to achieve a sustainable and equitable world. And our role as the Ocean Knowledge Action Network is to help connect the many global research projects that you see here on the left of Future Earth with ocean stakeholders and our partners working in the ocean realm who are trying to do sustainability science and transdisciplinary research. Here you see our ocean can over here among the other knowledge action networks of Future Earth. And we work very closely with our ocean-oriented partners in the Future Earth network that are circled in green. I won't go over all of them, but you can read them there. We also work with other international science networks, including climate networks, oceanic research networks. We work with international social and transdisciplinary science networks and initiatives. These are often poorly represented in global ocean science, and so we are really doing a lot to make sure that they're an integral part of our network. We're focused with the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development to make sure that we are working closely with networks and programs there that are also trying to do co-design. So we're working with 3 networking programs at the UN Decade and then 2 science-oriented action programs at the Decade as part of our network. This is just to start, of course, and then we will be expanding it to all of the Ocean Decade programs. And then finally, we're working with private sector collaborators to make sure, A, that we can connect the private sector with science and the public sector, but also B, to make sure that we're taking advantage of the very latest technology and thinking about how to build networks. So our private sector collaborators really are focused around finding new tools to bring people together around the world. The way we do this is by meeting regularly online, because we're global and we haven't had a chance to get together in person. And our monthly meetings really focus on this relationship building that has to be core for our network. This includes focusing on building connections and trust across our network, identifying the needs of partners and the ability of other partners to help meet those needs. Our monthly meetings have lots and lots of one-on-one interactions so people can meet each other and get to know each other. We're working together to identify our shared values and principles, and also our common purpose. And we do this through polls, by interviewing each other, and we work in small groups called learning circles where we can focus on specific issues of interest to our partners. The idea is to do this with our bottom-up partners that we have now, but each of these partners is in a different region, and we hope that each partner will take the lead, growing our network across their region. So that's our Ocean Knowledge Action Network in a nutshell. If you have any questions, please go to our website at oceancan.org, or don't hesitate to reach out to me by email at linwood.pendleton@oceancan.org, or contact our science officer, Stella Alexandrov, at stella@oceancan.org. Thank you so much.